So charts and graphs are a really important aspect when it comes to providing information in a PowerPoint deck. And the reason for that is PowerPoint is a visual medium, and we can use charts and graphs because they are a good way for us to show numerical or percentage or comparison information. Certainly much better than trying to describe it in a textual methodology. So it's important that you understand the charts and graphs and when to use which ones, but it's also important to understand that PowerPoint is a visual medium. And anytime you can use some type of a visual depiction of what you're trying to say, it's even better.
Oh, but Mary, I'm sure it is about 10. We're going to be right there.
So the first of the charts that we're going to talk about is the infamous pie chart. Now, the pie chart is best for proportional or percentage data, but you can't go more than 6 categories. Otherwise, it starts to dilute the value and it becomes harder to really see which categories are responsible for the biggest part of the pie. So here you see 6 categories. And really, when you look at it, that's about as big as you can go. Additionally, you always want to think about the colors. You know, this particular chart, the yellows, there's probably too many of them, and you really need to break that up maybe with something like red or something, you know, something else. But you want to make sure that your colors are distinct enough so that people can understand and see the percentages. And always add the percentage amount, 9%, 2%, 10%, and make sure you do so inside of the pie chart. Now, unlike the pie chart in the previous slide, this is not necessarily based on 100%. The reason we use a vertical bar chart is to show comparisons. So you might have 5,000 products in your product mix, but you want to show the top 5 and how they compare against each other. That's what a vertical bar chart is, or vertical bar graph is good for. The other reason that we like this, or what we use this for, is the endpoints, you know, how high something goes, is very easy to see in a graph or a chart like this. So I like a color-coded one. I think it's nicer if you add the colors because it distinguishes each of them from each other. But you don't have to. You can also do this completely in black. But as you can see, I've done this one for you in a color coding. The other thing that this is good for is the way we view it. We can go right across the top and we can see, you know, that the cat represents almost 11, you know, almost 11% of what people own. Obviously, I made this up, so dogs would be higher. But this is the purpose of this. And this has an up and down orientation. I'm going to show you now one that's on its side, a horizontal, but they basically have the same purpose. This has exactly the same advantages as the vertical bar chart. It just happens to be horizontal. And I think with the horizontal, you can get more categories in along the left-hand side because you're running your numbers down the right. It's the same style. It's just a different view. And again, you can get some more categories in than you can when you're doing the vertical, but it covers the same purposes. So this is what we call a segmented bar chart. I don't use these very often, but I have seen them used a lot in when you're looking to compare company over company. So here you see company A, B, C, D, and E. And what you might have here is you might have what part, you know, what percentage is part A, part B, and part C. So this tells you a comparison. You can compare yourself to your competition, and you can say, okay, well, if I'm company B, I'm certainly not doing well with product C. I need to work on that. If I'm other companies, I can see that company B has a real stranglehold on product A. So the whole purpose of a segmented bar chart is to see how things break out within a category. And you can use these. I like the color format again. I prefer this to the black and gray and white, but you don't have to use a color formatting. So line graphs are very, very powerful and very often used when we're trying to compare changes over time. And especially if those changes are not significant or not large, but you still want to show that progression over time. So here you can see At the bottom, we have the years 1967 through 2007. And what we're doing is we're looking at the number of households that have a total income above $75,000. And you can see as what we call the independent variable and the dependent variable. You're showing how one impacts or has a change over the other. And we usually use these over long periods of time. You don't have to, obviously you can use them over short, but they're typically used to track changes over long periods of time. So an X and Y graph can show two groups in an easy to understand format. And as you can see here, what I've done is I've given you time and temperature. And if you're doing every minute, like minute number 2, minute number 3, 4, 5, it's really hard to use any of these other formats to show the changes that take place in time and temperature where it's such a small incremental change. So this is a really good way to do it. And you can do it one of two ways. You can do it on the X and Y axis, which I showed you in the previous slide, or you can do it here in what we call a chart. So I think the chart is easier to read, but imagine if you had to read this for a 24-hour period. That might be really difficult. So that's why you would use an X and Y axis to plot out the differences in the temperature. The next series of slides are about presentations, and you're going to see a lot of mistakes that people make in PowerPoint presentations. And I see them all the time, by the way. I get PowerPoint presentations from seniors, who I've had in previous classes, and they're just chock full of text. That's not what the purpose of a PowerPoint presentation is. What the purpose of a PowerPoint presentation is to give a visual and then to talk to the PowerPoint. You can always put your notes in the notes section underneath your slides if you feel like you want to remember that, or you want to make sure you share that information with the person for later if they want to go back through it. But my recommendation is you do a voiceover. So as a senior vice president of sales or former senior vice president of sales, I presented all the time. I did PowerPoint presentations all the time. And one of the things that I found I like to do is after I would present to somebody, I would voice over all of the slides of what I said at the meeting. And then I would send that slide deck to them so that they had not only the slide deck, but my voiceover. And that's twofold. I don't want them to have to remember what I said. I want them to be able to go back and hear what I said. And sometimes people can't make your meeting, and you want to make sure that they get the same presentation that the people got at the meeting. So not only would I do the PowerPoint presentation and talk to it, but I would also do a voiceover and add my notes to the bottom of the slide. If the account is really important to you, trust me, you will take every effort to get it done. So what you're going to see on the next couple of slides, and there's usually information after each slide to tell you what's wrong with it, are mistakes that people make when they put together PowerPoint presentations. When it comes to presentations, trust me, Murphy's Law, something will definitely go wrong. Especially if you're presenting at somebody else's location, because you can never be sure what equipment they have or whether it's as functional as the equipment you're accustomed to. So I always bring a backup. I bring a written. I also bring at least 2 USB drives just in case something happens, and I bring my own computer, because you want to be professional about things, and being professional means that you're prepared. And by having the written, presentation, you can go by the written presentation, or you can also leave that behind if you have to. Always take the extra care to figure something's going to go wrong. Always arrive a little bit early, set up, run through your slides, make sure everything's good. Always talk to your audience, not to the slides. Face your audience, have your computer open in front of you with the slides running so you don't have to turn around and look at the slide. The minute you turn around and look at the slide, you give people an excuse to take out their phone and start looking at their messages. And trust me, when they're doing that, they're not going to be paying attention to your message. So don't look at the slides. Look at the audience. And don't read what's on the board. Whatever's on the slide should be a little bit of text and some visuals, and then you can add to that. By talking to the slide and talking beyond whatever is on there. If you're just reading word for word what's on the slide, nobody's going to listen to you. They're just going to be paying attention to the words. They're going to read ahead, and then they're going to disengage, and they may miss vital examples or information that you share. And then leave time for Q&A. I think that's just standard. I try to leave at least 10 minutes for Q&A, especially because I was in the sales field, and you always wanted to make sure people had an opportunity to ask you questions. Try not to do the slide rush. Listen, it happens. You want to get through a bunch of slides, and you get there and people tell you, well, I don't know, I don't have an hour, I have 30 minutes. But try not to just rush through your slides. Skip the ones that you don't think you can get to, and make sure that you have an appropriate number of slides for the amount of time you've been given. Always cite your sources. You'll see my sources are cited in here. Most of the slides I design myself, so I don't have to worry about that. And then keep it simple. It's just a tool. PowerPoint is just a tool. It is not the end-all and be-all. And always leave people with more than just the PowerPoint presentation. A written copy or something else always helps. As you experienced in week 2, we all learn a little differently, right? Some of us are visual learners, some of us are auditory learners. So by having a mix of the different mediums and presenting that way, you'll ensure that the type of learner is covered. I hope you've enjoyed this slide deck.